Hey. Hello, hello. Welcome back to Nightshift with Andrea up late. I'm joined tonight, as always, by my co-host, Brian Sanders.
Yes. What? You gave me a look.
What is that?
I don't know. I looked over and you gave me a look like,
Well, we already have somebody in the chats who's asking you to sing a song, so.
Oh, what do we sing?
Can you read the chats?
Oh, I can read. I didn't know what blockhead meant.
Welcome back, everyone. This is a true crime podcast. We air every Tuesday night, sometime between the hours of 7 and midnight. It changes all the time. Eastern time. Usually it is around 8 o'clock. And then we drop to audio streaming wherever you listen to podcasts. So iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. Usually whatever we air live, we drop in the next day or two. I'm trying to get better about it because I've kind of fallen off the wagon with that a little bit. Tonight's case is no exception in terms of it being a crime podcast. You know that, and that's why you're here. But just keep that in mind, and listener discretion could be advised here and there. So we're going to get into it pretty soon. But first, do you have notes on this year?
Oh, I do, in fact.
You do, in fact. Okay, so most of you know that we usually talk a little bit about some pop culture or kind of more famous or infamous crimes that took place in the year in which the case we're talking about took place as well. So we'll talk about music, movies, what have you. And this is where I hand the mic over to my pop culture expert.
Yes.
Brian. The year would be 2001. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All righty.
Also, one of the things that I've started doing is finding a little more obscure facts.
Okay.
Mainly because a lot of people know the big things. I like to get into some of the more smaller things. So, like we know George Bush was elected president or took office that year. 9/11 occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible tragedy. Changed the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get into like smaller things that are little things that no one's heard of.
All right.
Or maybe they have. I don't know.
What do you got?
And it was 2001. So it was an old movie called 2001 Space Odyssey.
Okay.
I've never watched it. I've heard it was a big hit or something a long, long time ago.
Okay.
But in 2001, we don't have AI yet. We don't have robots talking to us. Technology is still lagging a little bit. But Pizza Hut did deliver a pizza to the space station in outer space.
That's really cool.
Isn't that nuts?
I wonder if they're doing that right now since they're stranded up there.
Oh, yeah. They'll have to do something like that.
Oof.
Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs about...
That's like the first Uber Eats.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with an outer space pun, but I couldn't do it.
Right.
The worst vehicle of 2001, I know Bosco loves this, is called the Pontiac Aztek, Aztek.
I don't like it because of how it's spelled.
Me either. Have you ever heard of it?
Was it a truck or a car?
What do you think of when you hear Pontiac Aztek with a K at the end?
I don't know. It sounds bad.
It's bad. It looks like somebody took a station wagon, crushed it, and tried to create like a
Pinto?
mini SUV sort of. Yeah. And then these weird like headlights and grill. And I don't know. Like there were a bunch of articles that talked about it was the worst wheels ever, worst vehicle. Yeah. All the way around bad. TV shows that year. The Bernie Mac show.
Oh, that's fun.
Premieres? Yeah.
Gosh, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. Fun fact, did you know that Bernie Mac worked for UPS?
No, but like when you worked for UPS, did they make you memorize these facts?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I was legit. I was in all the way. Did you also know that 1 out of every 6 Americans work for UPS at least once in their life?
Who in the chats? Because if these statistics
I bet you right now, we got Zen Cop podcast in the chats. I do want to say thanks for jumping on. He did an episode with Ed Calderon, Manifesto podcast recently.
Great, but was he an employee at UPS?
I bet you he was. I got $5 that says the Zen Cop podcast, Mac Rollins worked for UPS.
All right. You can let us know in the chats. What else we got?
The Never Ending Story TV show, season 1 and only one season. 2001. Can you believe they only have one season?
Somehow you continue to find the TV shows that came after the movie.
It seemed to be a trend then. People couldn't be creative.
Was it any of the same actors in the TV
show? Not the same actors, but apparently the same
Noah Hathaway wasn't in
storyline.
it, and
No,
okay,
no.
As the little boy,
Noah was not.
Okay.
But the Never Ending Story was a TV show.
Okay.
There was a movie called Glitter with Mariah Carey in it, apparently, but nobody remembers that.
This was a better answer than I could have anticipated.
Okay.
You reading the chats?
No, read them to me. I can, but I can't.
So Zen Cop responded.
Okay.
Not only did he not work for UPS.
Don't you say it.
He worked for FedEx.
All right, everybody. Strike what I said earlier. Go ahead and unfollow him. Dude, FedEx.
Even if you were making that up right now, I'm going to send you some cash for that.
Okay, I'll give you a pass. It's FedEx, but no, I hated FedEx to the point when I was driving on campus, I would drive very slowly so the UPS truck or the FedEx truck behind me couldn't deliver their packages on time. All right, okay, let's move on to better pop culture.
What else we got?
Eminem gets sentenced to 1 year probation for a gun charge. Let's see. Vince Vaughn is charged in a fight, like a brawl.
Okay.
His buddy, actor Steve Buscemi, gets
that's right. That's right. I had forgotten about that.
And of all places,
was it Nashville?
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Wilmington. That's what it was. I knew there was.
At the Fire Belly Lounge. There's a few stories out there that Vince either talked to a girl or a girl talked to Vince. Either way, that supposes what sparked the argument. I don't know. That's what.
I don't know, but I want to be at a bar with Steve Buscemi and Vince Vaughn.
I mean, wouldn't
that be fun?
Yeah. But unfortunately, they got in a big old fight while they were in town filming Domestic Disturbance, a movie of
place.
Scott Weiland, is that how you pronounce it? From Stone Temple Pilots.
Weiland.
He was charged that year for assaulting his wife, pled guilty, and did some probation.
Okay, that's nuts.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Jennifer Lopez and a guy named Sean Combs. I think some people call him P. Diddy.
Gross.
They broke up after 3 years. I had no clue they were ever together back then, but that's interesting. The Xbox was released.
Oh, wow.
Vince McMahon of wrestling fame launched the XFL. Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
No, but I don't care.
No. And I think no. Last thing, music.
What you got?
Drops of Jupiter by Train.
We just had a conversation about this recently, but do you know that Train and Jennifer Lopez toured together around that time?
Did you know that fact because of why? How did you know that?
Because I heard that they came through town.
Was it a good show?
That was a long time ago.
Did you like it? That's all I got.
All right, that was a long time ago. All right. Hey, Davey. All right, you guys. So if you're new to Nightshift, this is, like I said earlier, a live YouTube show. And with that, we have friends in the chats. So you can hop on in the chats. It's free. You just have a YouTube account. And then you get in the chats. Like I said, it's free. You can engage with us. At the beginning of the show, you can write whatever you want throughout, but then we'll come back around to engaging more at the end. But it's a great time to clarify things or ask questions about the case. Also, if you're new here, I am a nurse, and Brian Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant. So he provides a lot of just knowledge and things like this when we're talking about these cases. We do primarily cover unsolved or unresolved, but not always. Tonight, though, we do. So we're going to get right into it now. We're We're going to cover a case that took place out of Prattville, Alabama, like we said, in 2001. And so today we're going to be talking about the case of Shannon Paulk. This is Paulk. The Tennessee in me might come out a little bit when I'm trying to say that name sometimes, and it might be difficult to hear what I'm saying exactly. Exactly. So Prattville, Alabama, just a little bit about that town. It's a suburb of Montgomery. So it lies approximately 80 miles south of Birmingham. And in 2001, Prattville had a population of 26,382. So not a very big town at all. The town was founded in 1839, and at the time was largely inhabited by Native Americans. And then in later years, Prattville became a golfing destination. So I think a couple of, help me with the golf term, the LPGA came through a couple of times. Anyway, so that's kind of what it became known as. But again, it became kind of industrial. It's rural, not a very large town. So little Shannon Paulk was born on May 8th of 1990. She lived in the Candlestick Mobile Home Park. So everyone that's been interviewed, and while this case doesn't have a whole lot online, you can find articles, but there's a podcast that I did listen to and that I've referred to a lot on this one, with a woman named Mel Roberts who covered this. And she actually started her podcast because of this case. And so she did like a 5, 6, 7 part series on this case. So she really covered, between her and then some old newspaper articles that I've kind of scrounged, I found the most details on it. And the most details came on her podcast because she did so many interviews. So she spoke with so many people in and around the case at that time that it was able to convey a lot of the details. But like I said, a lot of members of this Candlestick Mobile Home Park were interviewed, as were Shannon's family. And they all say that this was just like a really close-knit community within this trailer park, that everybody was had a great time. One of the stories was that a lady said that she was going to go off to work one day on a holiday, like July 4th or Easter or something. And a neighbor resident had prepared her a special meal and brought it over to her so she could celebrate the holiday at work. And she said that, you could just go outside. Everybody's either cutting their grass or cooking out, and everyone knew everyone. And just, they all describe it as a very happy place. And that what took place here in 2001 essentially turned the lights off. They say it almost flipped a switch and the whole place just became something unrecognizable after that. Kids were no longer outside running around. Families were not, outwardly as jovial and things like that. So just keep all of that in mind. I think it was like a buzzing, happy little area at the time. So the trailers lined roads that were named after a baseball theme. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a Dodger road, Expos, Mets, these types of names. So these are all the roads within the trailer park. So on the morning of August 16th, 2001, Shannon's mom, Marie, had to be at work very early in the morning. And like she's leaving at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So very, very early in the morning. Marie says, quote, Shannon was asleep on the couch. So I kissed her on the forehead and I left her with my other daughter being there. So 11-year-old Shannon had a 14-year-old sister named Lisa that was sleeping in the back bedroom. So when Marie got off to work, or she got off work later that afternoon at 2:30 p.m., she picked up her grandson from the babysitter and planned to go to the store to get a treat for Shannon. So Shannon had been a little down in the dumps. Her parents had been split for a few months. Sources differ as to whether or not they were already divorced or separated. But either way, her dad lived a couple of hours away and she still kept in close contact with him. But that was kind of the situation. So she lived at home with her mom and her sister, and Shannon's little baby nephew, I just referred to Marie's grandson, lived with them as well. And so that morning on the way to work, Mom, Marie, gets up, gets the baby together so she can drop him off at who was babysitting for him that day. She goes to work very early with Lisa and Shannon sleeping at home, and she gets off at 2:30 that afternoon. So she picks up the grandson, like I said, was going to go grab a little treat for Shannon. So Shannon was a fairly early riser herself, and school had not yet started. Again, this was mid-August. So Shannon had the dwindling summer day ahead of her. She had plans to retrieve a baby walker from a neighbor's home. So you picture like her sisters referred to it as more like a saucer that a baby would sit in. But either way, she was excited, evidently, to pick this up for her nephew. But keep this walker. I always tell you to take something and put it like kind of in the back of your head while we're talking. Put it in the back of your head. We're going to come back around to it. And I think that when you name a lot of things in this case, this would be one of the subject matters in the case that causes a lot of scratching of heads. And I'll explain why. And it's actually a very pivotal part, no pun intended with that walker, of the story. So Shannon was up and about, like I said, a bit of an early riser. So evidently she'd been looking forward to getting this little walker because she was really excited to put the little baby nephew in it. You know, as you can imagine, 11-year-old girls are often very maternal and enjoy taking care of little babies. And Shannon was no exception. She had baby dolls and baby strollers that she was known to see, seen walking around the neighborhood often with them. So the earliest sightings we have of Shannon, we're going to go on and get right into the timeline now because we really don't have much build up before what happens and everything else takes place after the fact. And that's when we kind of are going to have to examine a scene and then be left to theorize a little bit with potential suspects. So the earliest sightings of Shannon would have been around 7:45 that morning. So Shannon visited a friend's house asking if she could play, but that little girl said that she couldn't go. So Shannon left, and the thoughts are that this was her first step before getting the walker. But keep in mind, while we have a fairly decent timeline, there are chunks of time within it that we don't know what's going on. Again, we talk about advancements in technology almost every single week. We don't have Ring doorbell cameras. We don't have all of this surveillance around there. But what we did have in this mobile home park was the surveillance of actual people, actual eyewitnesses, because like I mentioned before, with them all being so close together and so close knit, everyone knew what everyone was doing all the time. And so that's how we have the information that we do have about the whereabouts of Shannon that morning throughout the trailer park. So again, at 7:45, her little girlfriend could not come out to play. So Shannon goes on and leaves. Shannon's sister, Lisa, says that she woke up at around 9 o'clock that morning. She says the TV was on loudly and that there was evidence that Shannon had fixed herself some breakfast. So Lisa says that Shannon was already out of the house when she woke up. So Lisa never even sees, the last time she ever sees Shannon would have been the night before because she never sees her on this day of the 16th. So this would have been normal behavior, Lisa says, for Shannon to be out and about early that morning. Reports are that she knew everybody there. She was kind of, she was almost a loner, but she also, in the sense of one of the neighbors mentioned that whenever she saw Shannon, she was alone, but at the same time, she was always to and from a friend's house. They say that she would talk to anyone that would talk to her. She had many friends that were young and old. And at approximately 10 a.m., somewhere between 9:30 and 10, Shannon stopped by a different friend's house on Metz Street. Okay. And so she's supposed to have stayed here for close to 30 minutes. This neighbor is a woman that said Shannon asked her to take her to the store to get some candy. This is also going to be a theme throughout this story, okay? So she asked this woman to take her to get some candy. The woman said that she told Shannon that she could not take her at that time because her child was napping, but she did tell Shannon that she could come back later on and she would take her then. We don't know where Shannon was from that first stop at 7:45 until 9:30 or 10, okay? So, I mean, it could be mindless. She could have just been playing in a dirt hill, at the woodline, who knows, but we don't know where she was at that time. A neighbor called that we call Miss Mary. Okay. Miss Mary is referenced a lot throughout looking into this case. And Miss Mary says that she saw Shannon out of one of her windows over at their neighbor's house. So she said that she saw Shannon knock on the door and talk to this lady. Okay. She said that she saw Shannon leave with the walker on her head. So here's where it gets funny. Remember when I told you to keep that walker in mind? So when Miss Mary says that she saw Shannon leave that house from that woman who had the sleeping baby, right? She said that she walked away and had the walker on her head. Picture a kid, it's kind of a big bulky item that's not very heavy, but she's got it just like propped on top of her head as she's like kind of walking down through the trailer park. That is not what's weird. What's weird is that we can't find, it's disputed when and where she got this walker. It's not disputed that it existed, and we have proof of that we'll talk about. but people cannot seem to explain where the walker came from. So there's a lady who's an older lady at this point, but lived in the neighborhood at that time, and had lived there for a long time. And she says that when I say that, she's been investigating this case. So she on her own has been talking to all these witnesses. When she hears something online or hears report of something, she kind of tracks down that lead to find out if that's something true or not. She's really put a lot of time and effort into this. In saying that, she still says that she scratches her head on this walker. No one has come forward to say, like, yeah, I gave her the walker. I'm the one who, like, it's really weird that nobody seems to understand that. But either way, she had it. And Miss Mary, remember, the neighbor across the way, says that she saw Shannon walk to the other side of the pond to, quote, Halloween man's house. This is just the first time that this case starts to get a little funny. So we have multiple nicknames, okay? So Halloween man evidently always decorated really big for Halloween. So that's how he gets the term Halloween man. I don't know a lot personally about him. There's not a lot written about him other than he's known as Halloween man throughout the neighborhood. So Miss Mary says that she sees Shannon walk to, like I said, the other side of the pond to Halloween man's house. And Miss Mary says that Shannon knocked on the door of his trailer, but no one came to the door, so he must not have been home. She said that this was the last time she saw Shannon. So it was the last time she had eyes on her, okay? She then would have walked Shannon back toward the back of the park. So her trailer was located in what they would consider the back of the park. So she kind of starts heading around the pond back in that direction. And a bit before noon, so now we have noon. So we talked about 7:45, then 9:30 or 10. Now she's got a walker. She knocks on this other door. No one's there. And now it's a bit before noon. So we have a chunk of time missing from between the woman she spoke with the napping baby and now. Okay. So Shannon knocked on the door on Expos, remember the street name, a few trailers down from her own. Okay. So this home belonged to a Prattville police officer. He lived there with his family. He had a wife and 2 sons. So evidently Shannon had found a puppy recently, but she wasn't allowed to keep it from her mom, right? And so then this man and his family have been taking care of the puppy. So she stops by to see the puppy. He tells her he's getting ready for work and that Shannon couldn't come in because his wife wasn't home and he was soon to leave. Their family rule was that no kids would be there to hang with their kids if they were going to be gone. Okay. So keep in mind, this is like a little side note from this story, but when we talk about paying attention to things and like don't take one source as gold. So I had read a couple of articles about this and it started getting twisted that like, well, you know, people would write like, well, remember that man said that she couldn't come in because his wife said kids couldn't come in if he was there and the wife wasn't there. So immediately it starts casting shade on this man. Like it looks really bad. And I'm not saying he's completely innocent in this. We don't know, but I just know that that's not actually what it was. So the more I dig, I realize like, no, like actually that was just their family rule. Like he wasn't going to have a kid in the house. He's leaving for work to hang out with his kids. That was a rule. And that rule makes sense without casting any kind of character doubt on him. Right. So they speak for a moment, like I said, around close to noon. And that was that. So this was going to be the last time that Shannon was seen at all. So at 1:15, this officer, his name is John, left home for work. This is when he says that he sees the baby walker. He noticed it on the curb in front of Halloween man's house. So remember, that's kind of on the other end of the trailer park than where he was. So it's widely believed that whatever happened to Shannon happened between 12 and 1:15 p.m. Because it was around noon that she was at his house. 1:15, he leaves for work. He sees the walker. He didn't seem to think too much of that at the time. Let's see here. So I'm going to read to you some other notes I have. My notes come in all, what is happening here? All shapes and sizes. Alrighty. So I am so sorry to you. Okay. Sorry, y'all. There we go. Okay. So policeman sees her. He leaves for work at 1:15. That's the last time we know of her to be seen. Okay. So evidently there was a neighbor who was pregnant who comes home later that day and sees that walker lying on the curb, and she thought it had been thrown away, and she got lucky, and gets this, something that she would need for her own home. So she brings it home, she scrubs it up, cleans it up real good. At some point, of course, later on in the future, she hears about Shannon, hears about the walker being with her that day, and so she tells the police where she found it exactly and when she found it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we know it's been wiped down and cleaned up, so that's unfortunate in one aspect. Okay. So we're going to come back to this, but evidently soon after what I'm about to tell you happens, we start an investigation. And not long after that, we get a sketch. And this composite sketch was actually what was gone off of for years. So for a long time, this was looked at a real, like a blocky face with like a goatee, a very specific looking individual. And that was also said to be like tied in with the accounts of potentially like a red vehicle or a dirty white vehicle with a braided license plate. So think of a license plate frame that's like metal and it looks like that metal is braided. Those two vehicles in this sketch were all kind of tied together. And then in 2018, there was a grand jury investigation that was reopened that we will discuss. And at that point, the little girl who had gotten older actually says that, no, like I kind of fudged that a little bit, but I was trying to help.
Yeah.
So it really kind of, once that was debunked, it felt like they were kind of moving backward for a little bit because they'd really been basing everything off of the idea. So you will still hear people talk about a red vehicle. And I'm not saying that independently that can't be true. But we do know that the initial reports of a red vehicle were tied to the sketch that we've learned were false. So have you, in your experience, encountered someone without malicious intent to give kind of a false lead on a sketch like that?
Not on a sketch, but on information. At least where they're just describing, oh, this is what I saw. And
trying to help.
Yeah, and it was on a kidnapping of a very small child, possibly kindergarten or first grade.
Okay.
So we were all kind of in a panic, and she thought she was helping. I don't know what kind of nonsense she had created, but it spun everybody in the wrong direction. And a really good sergeant was just like, she probably got on a school bus with her friend. And he was dead on the money.
Okay.
But it's
interesting, we hear of people like falsely confessing and people kind of, inserting themselves. And it doesn't sound like this is what it was. It sounds like a kid trying to help, but for whatever reason, is giving incorrect information. So just keep that in mind. We will come back to that sketch here and there, but just know that that's not anything that we can go off of at this point. Okay. So I will continue reading to you now. So Shannon, like I said, normally did play outside until sundown. Remember the neighbor who said that she was often alone. She was often seen alone outside. So it was not really noticed or looked at to be a big deal that she was missing until around 7:30 that evening. So at some point, Mom gets home. She doesn't think much of it. She kind of tends to housework and getting food together, these kinds of things. Assumes Shannon's going to be home very soon. But like I said, until 7:30 or so, it wasn't really alarming. So evidently, Shannon's mom sends her sister Lisa around to knock on doors to see if she's at anybody's house, but she was nowhere to be found. So finally, around 8:30 or so, she calls Shannon's dad. Remember, he was living a couple of hours away at this point. And he, it was actually his turn to come get Shannon the next day for his kind of custodial time with her. And when she realizes that Dad hasn't heard anything from Shannon, he says he's going to come right over. And so he will tell you that he, hightailed it to the house. And by now, some aunts and uncles are starting to show up. They have a close-knit family. You'll hear more than one time about a couple of different aunts and uncles that were very, very close with Shannon. And they tell really sweet stories of remembrance of Shannon and spending their time with her. So they just start asking all these questions. They go on. And I think around 10 o'clock or so, they're continuing to search. And they said that everybody in the neighborhood had been really helpful. As you can imagine, again, they're all really friendly with one another. So everybody was really friendly, but there were a couple of guys who acted a little funny. So let me tell you about these winners, okay? So one of them who lived right across the street from Halloween Man, which again I can't tell you much about Halloween Man personally because there's not much written on him. There was one guy who took a long time to answer, but when he did answer, he just cracked the door. He didn't open it widely, and he was someone who was known around the trailer park. Like, he was kind of jovial with everyone. He would walk around and talk. So this would be inconsistent behavior for him. He cracks the door open and he says, "Nope, I don't know anything about where she is," and then proceeds to say she probably just went to the store to get some candy. But it's 10 o'clock at night, and the gas station nearest them was not within really walking distance for Shannon. And she was only 11 years old. So I'm not sure why that would be his first. Everyone kind of has hung on to that in the sense of it's just an odd thing to say.
Yeah. Because most people are going to be like a little more concerned.
Well, and they kind of feel like he would have been as well because all these neighbors know him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Specifically him.
Probably just went to the store.
Yeah. And the cracking of the door rather than took a long time to come to the door and then did not open the door fully for them. Well, this man, you will remember his name because they have deemed him Root Beer Man. Okay, so we have Halloween Man. Okay. Now we have Root Beer Man. Now, this isn't monikers given by the police officers or since the investigation ensued. This is actually throughout the trailer park. He was known as Root Beer Man. And the reason for this vomit is because of what he would do with the children. So he would get kids into his house and have them do things around his home, and he would give them candy and sodas and things like that. But what actually happened is Root Beer Man, let's see where I wrote it down here. So sorry. I might not have actually even. Well, anyway, he was 53-year-old Jack Earl Gibson. And when they eventually do get, I'm not sure if they had a search warrant or if he actually just complied eventually with them just walking in the home to look around. But detectives found 4 printed out photos of child pornography. They were all photos of prepubescent girls between the ages of 6 and 12. And of course, that causes them to now arrest him. So if I'm not mistaken, I think he was arrested August 19th, which she went missing on the 16th. So this is right after this. He is arrested for child pornography, and they then obviously search everything at this point. So they seize his computer. Remember, though, 2001. So I wouldn't say that the internet was in its infancy, but a lot has changed since 2001 and the capabilities then. In fact, detectives on this case will say the verbiage, when you go back and read the old newspaper clippings, it'll say in this day and age, the way that we now have, because it's kind of new, the way we now have the internet, this is going to unfortunately broaden the horizons, open the doors for this kind of behavior to be more prevalent. And obviously, knowing what we know now in 2024, probably unfortunately more so than they could have even imagined. Yeah. But when they search his computer, Root Beer Man's computer, they find over 1,000 images of child pornography. He was charged, convicted, and he's serving forever and ever and ever, as he should, in jail. Now, at some point, investigators do go back to Shannon's family to say that none of the images they recovered on his computer or in his home were those of Shannon. So they can't find actual links to Shannon. He was 55 years old, and he lived at 1324 Met Street. So he was just up the street from Shannon. So he is in the Autauga County Jail. Gross. So that's Root Beer Man. Okay. Remember, everyone else had been incredibly helpful here. So they say that actually when he would lure the older kids in the home, remember we've talked about this kind of thing before, but if he has a proclivity to minors that are prepubescent, you can kind of age out. And so the older kids would come and clean his home and these kinds of things for money or for treats, and the younger kids, evidently, he would offer them these bribes of candies and drinks and take their photos. So the other man that people had kind of looked into was another neighbor there in the trailer park named Ty Foster. You guys, if you thought it was bad, it only gets worse for a moment. He wasn't concerned at all that they were looking for Shannon near him. And people thought that this was crazy, though, because Ty had children that were close to Shannon's age. So you would just kind of think, parent to parent, this is something you'd be concerned with. What if it happens to your kid, right? So evidently Shannon had spent time at his home. She had played with his children and befriended them at some point. So they say, investigators will say that it was kind of obvious the way he seemed to just brush off their efforts with him. He was just not interested in helping whatsoever. So get this, though. Ty Foster actually was arrested just, I believe, weeks after Shannon went missing, if not days or weeks. It was not long after. And eventually in 2003, pled guilty when he finally went to trial to 2 counts of sodomy on a 9-year-old boy. So we now have, we talk about for every rat you see, right? And so the rest of that sentence is there's, 100 you don't see. So we know of now 2 predators, child predators within her, like on her street, in her neighborhood. And that's 2 that we know of. And these aren't any kind of, there's no misunderstanding here. No, these are bad, like bad men who did very bad things. And these are just the ones that we know about. There are musings here and there of a third, but it's hard to find and sources conflict. So I'm just not going to speak on it because I can't give you proper information. So I don't want to do that. So those 2 guys, so Root Beer Man and Ty Foster, both in prison to this day, thank goodness, but they were out and about doing their thing up until that time. So they used dogs, they used helicopters. At first, she was looked at as a missing person in the terms of like a runaway. And family was a bit frustrated because they did not think that was the case. But then they came around, really started the investigation heavy. Like I said, dogs, helicopters, you name it. The FBI at some point started to get involved. They do bring a cadaver dog in at some point. And so he goes inside, sniffs around some of Shannon's things inside her home. And then they take him out. And when they take him out throughout the neighborhood, he does stop at Root Beer Man's house. And he shows with his language that he has a hit at Root Beer Man's house. And evidently he searched around the bottom of the trailer for about 45 minutes. So I don't know. And I couldn't even get a good grip because every time I tried to look that up in researching this case, what I would get back would be things like, how long can someone be dead for a cadaver dog to hit on them? And how long? I want to know, how likely is it that you're going to be doing that for 45 minutes? Like, in any experience that you've had, does that not necessarily mean anything? Or is that kind of a long time to be somewhere, just the perimeter of a trailer, which isn't very big?
Yeah, I was never K9, so I don't know all the answers there, but I would assume any kind of presence like that where they're alerting to something over and over, or alerting to a section like that, I would imagine it has something to do with something decomposing.
And if you're not aware, cadaver dogs, we've talked about it before. It's not an exact science, but they can be pretty on the money. And they can distinguish between decomposing humans and other things. So if they're making a hit, it's not, like there's a dead deer over there or something, because the enzymes and the chemicals that break down within a human's body are a bit different. And so, and if you've smelled both a human and an animal, even just with our very, terrible sense of smell in that sense, you can tell, we as humans can tell the difference, but these dogs can pick up on like the most slight nuances there. All right. So the dog does that and then kind of Root Beer Man's house for about 45 minutes. And then he kind of follows over to like a nearby wooded area. There was a forest. And then there's some railroad tracks, and then basically over to County Road 4, and that was where it seems to have disappeared. Keep County Road 4 in your noggin. And in fact, when they go back into Shannon's house, investigators find, and this is interesting too. So I actually listened to her aunt, Shannon's aunt, speak on this. And it's hard. You can find it in a few places, but it's kind of hard to come by. So evidently there was a piece of paper on a journal or a diary or something like that in Shannon's room that family has confirmed to be Shannon's handwriting, that is either directions or a drawn map of an area that would lead you to County Road 4. Then there's verbiage of a red vehicle. Sources differ in whether that was a truck or a Jeep. So I actually was texting with Shannon's sister Lisa today, and when I asked her about that, she said she didn't even actually know what I meant when I was talking about the journal, and offered up her aunt to speak. And I haven't had time to speak with her yet today, but I certainly want to. But the aunt has been very close in with the investigation and with the detectives throughout this time as well. And so that's a detail that I can't imagine would just be made up. It's too specific, but no one, just know that exists. Nothing's come of it necessarily that we know of, that the public's been made aware of. So it's just odd. I don't know. I mean, and that's where her scent disappeared, was on County Road 4. So on October 6th, 2001, it was about 60 days after her disappearance, 2 hunters were rabbit hunting in Autauga Wildlife Management Area. So this is a public hunting area. It's about 20 miles or so north of Prattville, where Shannon lives, okay? So these 2 guys are hunting. They came upon an area that just kind of looked like some debris was in the brush line, and they had dogs with them. And they said that they kept going back and to crank up the truck, and the dogs are kind of acting funny, and they're going back and forth. And they had actually gone past this area and past this, like, kind of what looked like a trash bag a few times. They thought it was just discarded trash, and their dogs kind of are losing their minds. And so they then realized, unfortunately, that there were remains. There were human remains there. This was, in fact, Shannon's body. It didn't take too long to determine this. And the clothing that was left there is what Shannon was described to have been wearing the day that she went missing. They actually said that they saw a skull first and thought it was a baby doll. They, of course, it's the last thing you're thinking to find. So just to be a little bit more graphic in nature about what was happening there, what they found. So they found it was Shannon's remains. Unfortunately, animals at some point had kind of gotten a hold of this, so the remains were scattered a bit. But what was found when investigators got there was she was not wearing any clothing, but her clothing was there in the bag, like in the trash bag. Her little undies that she had on, her aunt confirmed that those are the type that she had just bought her prior, and they were either on her head or around her neck. Those are the 2 reports. There was rope involved to her body, and then potentially also around the trash bag, or not. That's one thing that kind of changes up depending on what source you read. But either way, we know that there was rope. We know that her underwear had been removed and placed somewhere on her head or neck. Her clothing was off, and she was in an actual trash bag. So while this is horrific in every kind of way, let's get back to the facts. This was a very remote area, a remote hunting area. This all led investigators to believe that whoever did this was familiar with this area. Doesn't mean he's a hunter necessarily, but it's someone probably local to the area. A lot of people, there are people who talk about this case and say that they've lived in Prattville their whole lives and never been there or didn't really know anything about that area, which would make perfect sense, right? So obviously the DNA confirmed that it was Shannon. The FBI gets to work, and so they go on and start to make a bit of an abbreviated profile on who they think could be the suspect in Shannon's murder. They say it would be a white male that's a loner, someone who possibly changed appearance suddenly in August of 2001 or after, possibly exhibited signs of anger or severe anxiety for unknown reasons in August of 2001 or October of 2001. So keep that in mind. Why would that be? So it's either after the person commits the murder, or maybe they do and they're just fine, but then once her remains are found, this behavior could change, the increase in stress, right, and anxiety. This is someone who possibly could have left town suddenly for a reason unknown or a reason that didn't make sense in either August of 2001 or October of 2001. This is someone who possibly has been following the case closely in the media. So had you known someone that was, super, that one's a little tougher, a little more subjective because, as everyone said, this rocked their town. So I think everyone was following it pretty closely in the media. Someone who was very likely familiar with Prattville, at the very least, or more specifically, the Otaga County Wildlife Management Area. So we don't know what the sketch was wrong. So we kind of, at the time, they were going off of this sketch. So maybe this isn't a white male, although this behavior, more times than not, I feel like with the profiling tends to be a white male. So evidently police went on to look at driver's licenses, like thousands of them. Everybody was trying to go off of like kind of this sketch and then this profile that was built before we learned to discount that profile or that sketch at all. It's terrible. So the latest development then happened in her case. So again, that was 2001 that this happened. Okay. So really just, it's crickets for a long time. So the latest development happened in 2017. Okay. So I'm going to read to you from the Montgomery Advisor news publication. So the district attorney was named Randall Houston. Okay. So the DA Randall Houston asked the courts, this was back in 2018, to extend the panel's term. So he's talking about the grand jury that came out to further investigate Shannon's murder. So he's saying that they have cleared 2 or 3 subjects. They have continued need for the grand jury. And he says, we've cleared 2 or 3 subjects, which is progress. We don't want to have to start over with a new grand jury. I don't think we have any problem getting the court to extend the grand jury's term, which would normally be a year. But he needs it for longer, obviously. And he says that it's making progress. And so that would be his plea. That's his argument as to why he wants to extend their term. So he said that for the last year, and again, this was in 2018, for the last year, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency's cold case unit has been looking into Shannon's case exclusively. Just getting the mountain of evidence from all agencies that are working the case together in one place is an accomplishment in itself. Technology has improved so that the evidence that was collected then that couldn't be tested for forensic evidence can now be tested. He said, I honestly feel that we have the best chance of solving this case now than we've had in the past 16 years. I don't think he's wrong. The grand jury has legal powers that can move the investigation along, he says. So think about this, y'all. He says, it's not illegal to lie to the police during an interview, right? It is illegal to lie to the grand jury, and they can force you to comply with their orders. So it was within 48 hours of that grand jury panel in 2007 starting that they went on and decided that sketch was not credible. So like that was the working of the grand jury, like I said earlier. It's just something else. So if that doesn't get any wilder, I will tell you that at some point they've completely said that they've cleared Root Beer Man from this. Okay. We don't know why. That's okay. But I don't know if now that we have different advancements in DNA technology, if he's still going to be considered cleared, if they, if the more rudimentary processing of it earlier on, could potentially not really exclude, but kind of, look like it clears. We've done a lot of cases where the DNA can be a little funny, and we don't want to necessarily exclude just on that basis, at least on something with this kind of gravity. So, I guess I'm going to go on and leave those papers. I left half my notes downstairs. Okay. Well, I will tell you this. There has been some suspicion, however, that Shannon's case is directly linked to other missing and or murdered girls cases in and around that area. So I will put this on Instagram. I meant to put this on StreamYard. I wonder if you can see it if I hold this up. Can you see? Is that just bright?
It's just bright.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's a map, though, of Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. All right. And I did that and I circled around it. And I did that because, get this, so that happened in 2001 with Shannon. Okay. In 1999, a little girl named Teresa Dean, who lived in a trailer park, was out walking and went missing. Her body has never been found. She lived in Macon, Georgia. Macon, Georgia is about 200 miles east of Prattville, Alabama. So not that far. That was in 1999, okay? In 2001, we have Shannon, right, go missing, and then we find that she had been murdered. So that was 2 years later. So then we have 2 more years later. In 2003, we have Tabitha Tutors. She was a 13-year-old little girl in a trailer park walking to school that morning and was abducted, and her body's never been recovered. Like I said, neither has Teresa's. But this was 2 years later in Nashville. Okay, I remember this well when that happened. That was a big case. Nashville to Prattville. Nashville's about 270 miles north of Prattville. Okay. And then we have someone named Lachey. You'll see her name is Heaven Lachey Ross. Her mom calls her Shay. So Shay Ross was a young girl. I believe Shay was also 11. And in 2003, she was abducted. She lived in a trailer park. And she was found 3 years later, actually in an abandoned house out kind of in the middle of a field. And she was from Tuscaloosa. Tuscaloosa is 80 miles from Prattville. Okay. So the farthest distance we have in all of these all of these cases is 270 miles down to 60, 80. So, take it for what it's worth. Again, these girls have a lot of similarities. Let me see here. The only difference is, let me tell you this. The only difference is Tabitha Tutors, the Nashville case from 2003, that happened in April of 2003, and that would be the reason that some people think that that doesn't belong if you're trying to find a connection between these. They say that Teresa Dean, Shannon, that we've been talking about tonight, and Shay Ross are connected because they all happened in August, 2 years apart. And not just in August, but within like 2 or 3 days of August. It was like August 16th, August 19th, August 17th of these 3 different years. And then again, Tabitha would be the outlier just because hers was in April. But people do weird things. So even if they were related, that one outlier doesn't mean that she's necessarily an outlier. Yeah. These girls all were between 11 and 13 years old. They all had blondish or lightish hair. They all lived in trailer parks. A couple of them were walking to school. So there are similarities that are worth paying attention to when you look at all of these. And we've talked often about the psychology behind this kind of thing and these type of killers. And when you get somebody who's going to bound, very likely sexually assault, though they've not ever come out to say that. But we do know that, like I said, her underwear was on her head. Her clothes were missing, were off of her. So I think it wouldn't be a far stretch to assume that that's potentially what happened. Again, they've not said what DNA they've recovered, if any. They did at one point come back to say that there was no DNA on the trash bag, which is a little difficult to believe. I mean, it's a trash bag, like whether it's, I mean, shoot, even just those hunters walking by, you know, if you kick on something or walk by and brush by, you know, who knows? But things have changed since then. So, you know, we had decent technology for developing DNA in 2001. We have it much, much better now. And we've discussed that at length. So what I was saying, though, is that someone who's going to kill someone in this manner, a very specific type of way, a very specific type of victim, very likely that's not either the first or the last time that person's going to be doing that. So I think that it really stands to reason that if these other girls that went missing or were murdered are not connected, that's fine. But there probably are others. Would you agree?
Yes, and I want to bring up the comments when you said the name Teresa Dean.
Mm-hmm.
That I was like, oh yeah, that's the one, and that's the one Bosco has referenced before. Yeah,
Bosco. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
so
talk about that.
he's commenting in here, but just for everybody listening, one of the listeners, Bosco, has actually talked to us before about the Teresa Dean case.
Yep.
So it's kind of coming around full circle, but
that's Ruthie, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's Shannon.
And just like you were saying with the wooded area, hunters, people that are familiar with that area, that narrows down your suspect pool. Obviously, I mean, and people go, oh, well, yeah, of course it does. But when you're looking at things like if you get correct indicators, like a vehicle description, a subject known to frequent the area, anybody that would know the patterns of behavior that these girls walk to school or that they walk to the bus or they walk to the store, and then you couple that with which ones of these people or persons has access to the woods or would or are hunters by nature, and then you start to just kind of dwindle it down. And in a town that small, I'm quite sure they probably had some other people on their radar, obviously, that we don't know about. But just to say
I'm getting more pictures, by the way, in case you can see me and I'm kind of zooming out here. You keep talking.
But just so that people understand that doing cases like this, when if you just focus on one and you do get details like that, and you have an area, a crime scene, a recovery site, and that sort of thing, and you start working it, if it is remote like that, it does narrow it down. And then you start getting into technology now that's available of, soil samples and analyzing them and understanding. And this is way above my brain. I don't have a science background. That's not what I did.
I do love that stuff.
But yes, the labs that can look at soil or look at any kind of plant or vegetation growth in something that has been in the woods for a certain period of time. And then they can tell you, hey, this vegetation inside this trash bag or inside of this container is not indigenous to this section of the woods. It's actually only indigenous to, and then they give you an area or a location.
Right.
And then that opens up your investigation to a different area. It's pretty impressive, the technology and the blending of science now and botany and those sort of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get this picture up here, but it is, I think I have one of, yes. So here's a picture. If you're listening, I've got a picture up on the screen right now of Teresa Dean, Shannon, who we've been talking about, Shannon Paulk, and Shay Ross, in left to right order like that. So I think you can definitely see the similarities in these little girls. Again, they all came from the same types of home situations, same age range, same complexion, all of that. So here's a map that shows, that's going to come out a little blurry for you, but either way, it shows where Shannon lived versus where she was found, I believe. So, I don't know. I know that's very minimal information for you, but what is your take on the idea of potential connection with those?
Well, obviously, if the more detail you've got in recovery sites or to decedents, then that add to it, it does seem very strange that you would have a pattern, and when we say close, people go, oh, that's 200 miles away or 90 miles away.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah. You ever met a hunter who's like, oh, well, I'm going to drive to the mountains or whatever. I mean, people will drive where, this is sickening, but they will drive where they can hunt or where they know people are most vulnerable. So that's not unheard of. Or you can have someone who does move locations, but I do think that just on the surface that they could be linked because of that, because of those, the pattern and the nature of the victims.
I was reading some of those comments. Yeah, Bosco, we can talk about that for sure. But yeah, so I think that, like, as her sister was saying, like I said, we were texting today, and she said that she's been in close contact with the lead detective on the case pretty frequently in all these years. Again, like we just said, that the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, or ALEA as it's coined, has been working this case exclusively now for a long time. They evidently were making some progress in 2017, 2018 with that grand jury. Sources say that there is a room, just like one room, dedicated to mounds and mounds and mounds of paperwork and, evidence and everything else. So I do think this is one that got a little frustrating for the citizens, thinking not much was happening or wondering why in the world they couldn't nail this one down. And it sounds like they're doing exactly what we kind of preach on every week, and that they've not implicated someone that they cannot convict with certainty. And so I think I get the feeling that there's a definite person of interest. It maybe a couple, but I think there might be one person of interest, and I think that they're just getting all of their ducks in a row.
Yeah, and it sounds like too that once you get kind of off track with the sketch, with the vehicle, and everyone always talks about, well, if someone saw it happen, then that's it, like that should be locked in, and then you find out, like, witnesses, their eyesight, it can be the angle, it can be they don't pay attention, or it could be just like this, where sometimes,
So they say that it's interesting too. There's something weird about her necklace. They say that her necklace was found, I believe, like in the parking lot of a convenience store across from where they lived, or I don't know. It was like busted. It was like broken. I didn't speak on it earlier only because it gets a little fuzzy with the details on that one. But I guess investigators did go to to a friend of hers to try to identify it as Shannon's. But it was like midnight. Like, went to this kid's house at like midnight to ask her to identify this necklace. And the kid did, but it was like weird and fuzzy. Like, the kid was like sleeping, and I don't know. It's just kind of, but it's another little detail. I do think that the idea of that baby walker is just kind of weird, the way it with everybody. And I think this is what one of the ladies spoke on earlier that had been interviewed that lived there in the neighborhood. Everybody, like I said, talks about how everyone knew what everyone was doing at all times there. People are always either sitting on porches or looking out windows or out in their yards. Like, so if you came or went, they would know it. And if you didn't live there, they would know it. And so they've said it just feels so strange that on this day is the day that either no one could come out and play, no one could take her to the store, no one could indulge her that day. She kept getting turned away, and that was not normally the case. And also that, like, just no one saw anything, which was just very different than what would be the norm there. Some people started whispering kind of funny about the police officer who said that she came to his door and he shoved her away because he had to go to work, but then he's the one who last saw her, and he's the one who started the idea that the baby walker was found on the curb in front of Halloween Man's house. Like, I think that is just what that is. It didn't seem to have really a lot of credible, I don't know, like misgivings or anything like that from the get-go. I don't know. I know that Root Beer Man was cleared, but good grief. That dude.
And I think about 2001 was meaning the early 80s was kind of when America, like, that became part of our culture of stranger danger, don't take rides, hitchhiking was down because people,
but not in this neighborhood.
And that's what I was going to say. It was like, it's almost the catch-22 where when a neighborhood is so open and everybody's having fun and, people have these nicknames, and like you and I both know that if we heard something about a root beer man in our neighborhood, we would be like, whoa, like, who's this dude? What's his name? Like, just because we know, it doesn't mean you can't be nice, but it is very alarming to start giving a lot of treats. And
well, I was going to say, particularly when you're like trading like child work in your home for treats.
Yes.
It's a little different if you say like, here, buddy, I'll give you a Coke, or if you weed my front yard. Yeah, sure. Of course.
Yeah.
And come to find out he absolutely was.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That said, I do plan to hopefully speak with Lisa a little bit more. She was really easy to talk to and really helpful with answering some questions I had on some of the specifics of the case. But again, they do a candlelight vigil now, I think, every year. And in hopes that also might be a lure, or just give some leads. So Melanie says she's never going to give a kid candy. She keeps it for herself.
I think most adults do, right?
So, okay. Well, that's the heavy portion of the night. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know who I talked to today to record an episode?
Who did you talk to today?
This cat named Drew Breezy.
Did you now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Brian had Drew on the Disruptors earlier today, and I cannot wait for that one to drop. When is that going to drop?
Oh, I might drop it tomorrow.
I think you should.
Or Thursday, but probably tomorrow. I'll probably go ahead and drop it tomorrow.
I think you should.
Yeah. No, we've talked about it since the beginning.
Oh, it's been 2 or 3 years.
Forever. Yeah. I can't remember how I stumbled on him, but great guy. Was a lot of fun to talk to him. He's got Comm Center. He's doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's gotten hacked in the past, so he's had to kind of rebrand his Instagram and stuff.
He rebranded quickly and did well with it. For sure.
He's just a good dude to talk to. Very, very interesting take on everything. Very logical. Yeah.
He's witty.
Yeah, he is.
I actually thought about Drew because when I was studying this case, root beer man's name is Jack Earl Gibson, and it's the joke about like the 3 names for like the bad guys, and Drew and I had a clip from a reel from a while back where we're doing that, talking about the 3 names of these killers. But so I always now think about Drew when I read those names. But.
Yeah. No, and it was good. So yeah, I'll probably drop that tomorrow.
Did he talk to you about like stage diving and his punk rock days?
No, we didn't. But you know who we did talk about?
Who?
Do we tell you at the end when we talk about music?
Sure. Give us a little like a teaser. I mean, you can say it, but
Jesse Stockton.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So if you guys, we got a shameless plug here. A local to our town musician who has a few albums out, and like selfishly for me, I'm glad he hasn't blown up because he's still just living here, hanging out, doing his thing, playing around town. But he absolutely should blow up because he's amazing. And Drew has gotten turned on to him. So he's fan. He actually played our wedding. So
I told Drew about that.
Oh, did
you? The song he played.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I can't wait to hear it. Yeah, I can't wait to hear y'all's talk. That should be a good one with y'all's experience and everything.
Yeah. So Jesse Stockton. Everybody go check him out. I mean, it's good. I think he does like live Instagram stuff, right? Like once a week, maybe twice a week.
Yeah, his friends or family will post when he's going live.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything else. We are I don't have anything else. I don't know what I was going to say. We do have the NASA looking stickers that say Nightshift. Those are a lot of fun. Those
love
are on
that.
Instagram.
I think that's one of my favorites.
Is it?
That Nirvana one though.
I like the Nirvana one.
Yeah.
You guys, all of that's still for sale. I've still got, as long as I've got them in stock, you can grab some. And that's about all. I haven't done a t-shirt or anything in a long time. I don't think we have big new developments on any of our cases. So
Bosco says, make sure you check out the Forever Road podcast.
Yes, that is Bosco's podcast. He also will talk about music, and he talks about vehicles.
Cars. He's a big fan of the Pontiac Aztec.
He said he's got one of the Nightshift, or maybe your decal, one of them.
Yeah.
So you guys can always follow Brian over at Brian Sanders Disruptors Instagram page.
Mm-hmm.
And then your YouTube is the Disruptors Podcast with BC and Ski.
Yep.
Okay. And then your website is
the Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
Okay. And his website has a lot of good info for all the stuff he's up to and going to be up to. So follow him on all of those things. And then again, you can follow me on Instagram at Andrea Uplate. Same name for the YouTube channel, yada, yada, yada. And I'll post all the details. I've got to post last week's on Instagram. Maybe I'll do that tonight. And then I'll get this on there. But yeah, y'all we really appreciate all your support. Go on and review, write a sentence, hit buttons, hit likes, subscribe. All that stuff doesn't cost a dime, y'all. It doesn't cost a dime. And while it's irritating to ask for it, it does help. So we really appreciate all your support.
Yeah, 5-star Spotify. I mean, it's literally click.
Oh, yeah.
On Spotify, if they're listening to Spotify and Apple.
If you're a New Kids on the Block fan, leave me a review and subscribe. Actually, did you know that Felony Melanie sent fangirl mail to me today in the sense of videos and pictures from her most recent experience while standing on stage with New Kids on the Block?
No.
Yes.
Standing on stage?
Yeah, there's a group of people. I guess it was part of like something you could do. And it was pretty dope.
I did see where you told her on that question I asked on Instagram about favorite first band. And you said that I better behave or you're going to tell everybody.
Spill that tea. What, your favorite New Kids song?
My favorite, I do have one song that I like by them. If you play it, I'll sing it and dance. I'm just kidding. Don't you play it?
Do you guys want to guess what that might be? We've played it before, but I think it's one that we never published the episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we have talked about it before. Maybe I even confessed that I like them, but I don't care.
Does anybody know?
It's not
Brian Sanders' very favorite.
We've been together for a long time, baby.
Yeah.
Do you have to leave?
Do you have to leave?
Just can't leave it. So listen to me.
He said, don't.
Please don't go,
Oh.
Oh my. I'm going to have to wear my nightgown, my New Kids on the Block nightgown. I find my sleeping bag.
Should.
I might wear it for one episode, yeah.
Do it.
It's like a t-shirt now. Okay, well, we've gone way too far if we got New Kids happening now. So,
yes.
Are you about ready to
go play Yahtzee? Yes.
Go play Yahtzee?
Yeah.
Yes.
For real. People think we're joking when we're talking about Yahtzee.
No, we play about 14,000 games a night.
Yeah. And it probably evens out a little bit. I've gotten a lot better in the last 6 months to a year.
Talk your trash. Talk your trash. All right, guys. We love y'all and really appreciate your... He just called you a poser.
No. Look, you guys, y'all got to have an open mind. If you hear a song and you like it, just be proud of it. Don't get upset. I will admit openly that I like that song. And
it's a good one.
Those dudes are pretty sincere for being like 15 years old or 17. It's not a bad song.
I don't even know. I don't know what happened in these chats.
What?
I don't know. It was earlier on. Okay. Well, we love y'all and we really appreciate you tuning in as always. You want to tell them good night?
Oh, yeah. Hey, good night, everybody.
So until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.